Honestly, folks, how hard is it to get uniforms right?
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you don't believe me, you can call me Sully. I've got to adjust my headset a little bit. It was falling off of my head. Sorry if there's a little scratching on the microphone there, but we're doing a live showing here. I've been podcasting for well over a decade now, and you would never have known it by watching me fumble with my microphone this morning. You can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever the hell it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. New customers, join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And already we have a couple of people on the chat here. And hey, how you doing, Chandler Bryant, and some other people who are watching in. Hey, let's get right to the trivia question. The trivia question I asked was, how many managers of the Angels have been the AllStar game manager? How many times in the history of the Major League All-Star game was the manager of the Angels? And a bunch of you all put in the obvious answer, which was Mike Scioscia. Some of you even prominently said just one, Mike Scioscia. Let's get some of the answers we have here. We have Mike Scioscia. We have it only one, Mike Scioscia, and a couple other of you were kind of catching on for a second that maybe there was more to it. That Scott Campbell said, I know Norm Charlton's tackling dummy Mike Scioscia did in 2003, but I have a feeling based on your question, there's more than one. Yeah, Scott Hortzmeister was pretty adamant. Only once with Mike Scioscia. Nope. The answer is 2 times. Now, Joseph Nelson gave a great guess, which was Gene Mauch. Nope. Now, normally, the All-Star game manager is whomever the two managers for the previous year's World Series teams. For example, we're going to have Bruce Bochy, and you're going to have you'll have Troy Lovullo be this year's All-Star Games manager. But there was one time the manager of the Angels, who wasn't Mike Scioscia, managed the All-Star Game. The answer is in 1974. The Angels manager was the All-Star Game manager. It was Dick Williams. Dick Williams was the manager of the defending World Series champion Oakland A's when they won the World Series back-to-back in 1972 and 1973. But because of a feud with Charlie Finley and the fact that Finley basically publicly humiliated one of his players, Mike Andrews, during the World Series, it was the last straw for Dick Williams, who resigned during the World Series clubhouse celebration. And he was initially going to go to the Yankees, but for whatever reason, Finley was able to block that signing, but he was able to sign and briefly be the manager of the California Angels. So while Alvin Dark went on to lead the A's to their third straight title in 1974, they didn't give the All-Star Game manager reins to Alvin Dark because he was replacing Dick Williams. They said, hey, Dick Williams managed the World Series winner. Give the reins to Dick Williams. So it's been a couple of times since they've established the rule that it's going to be the previous year's World Series managers in the All-Star game. That's been a little bit funky. Dick Williams in 1974 was one of those times. Another one of those times was Billy Martin managed the 1982 American League All-Star team when he was the manager of the A's. The A's lost the ALCS the previous year to the Yankees, but this was during the crazy Steinbrenner era, and Bob Lemon managed the Yankees in the World Series, but by the time they got to the All-Star game, Bob Lemon was already fired. Instead of having the current manager, Gene Mauch, manage the team, they had Billy Martin, who was the runner-up in the ALCS, manage the All-Stars. Don't worry, Billy Martin was the manager of the Yankees the next year. The other couple of times it was a little funky was in the 1995 All-Star game, coming off of the strike. There was no World Series the previous year, so Buck Showalter, the manager of the Yankees, and Felipe Alou, the manager of your Montreal Expos, were the managers because they had the two best records at the time of the strike. The only other time there was a weird thing that happened was Dusty Baker was the manager of the Giants when they won the National League pennant in 2002 and managed the All-Star game the next year. However, he was the manager of the Cubs the next year. He resigned, or his contract was over, and he signed with the Cubs after the World Series. So Felipe Alou did not get to manage that All-Star game. So there you go. There you go. Hey, a lot of weird stuff is going on, but Jerry Seinfeld, who's always been, he was one of my heroes in comedy when he was a great stand-up when I first saw him on Letterman in the 80s, and had obviously created one of the three greatest sitcoms in the history of television, along with Larry David. In case you're wondering, the show was called Seinfeld. He famously said that sports fans root for laundry. We're not rooting for players. We're not rooting for even cities. We're rooting for the uniforms they're wearing. We're rooting for laundry. If you hate a player who played against your team and they suddenly joined your team, suddenly you love that player. I saw it many times when players who Red Sox fans booed like crazy, and they showed up on the Red Sox. Hey, we love him now. Johnny Damon was hated by Yankee fans, and Johnny Damon stuck the dagger in the heart in the 2004 playoffs. A couple of years later, Johnny Damon's on the Yankees. Now they're cheering him. And Johnny Damon helped the Yankees win a World Series. It's once you put on the different uniforms, boom, your devotion and love for a player can change. And it is a rite of passage for players who are coming up through the minor leagues as they're wearing all these uniforms of these minor league teams, the Durham Bulls, the Lansing Lugnuts, the Hillsboro Hops, the Spokane Indians, the Modesto Nuts, the Columbus Clippers. When you're wearing all these uniforms, you can't wait to finally put on that big league uniform. It has an amazing feel. When you look at the uniforms, yes, there have been tweaks, there have been updates to it. They're no longer wearing the wool uniforms, or they never wore, as going back to Seinfeld, the cotton uniforms that George Costanza wanted the Yankees to wear. The uniform is what you aspire to. It's when I was a kid, I kept having these pullover uniforms for the different teams. I felt like a baseball player. That's why you see grown men putting on the uniforms in the stands. Some of them collect them. I don't quite do that anymore because, do you know why? I'm going to be 52 soon. A third of my life is over. So, but you see people putting on jerseys, trying jerseys, wearing jerseys, and they want to look fabulous. The major league uniforms have to look the best. They're the tuxedo. And when you're wearing classic uniforms, the Red Sox have a classic uniform, the English D for the Detroit Tigers, the birds on the bat for the Cardinals, the NY, the interlocking NY for the Yankees, the black and gold for the Pirates. You can look at some of the Dodgers with the blue script across it. You can create a direct link between the players now and of many, many, many years before. You've had funky uniforms, weird uniforms. The 70s, everyone went a little bit bananas. I happen to love those uniforms, but what are you going to do? But they're wearing that uniform, when you put it on for the first time, and I think it's one of the most intriguing things of opening day and of spring training, is the first time you see players wearing those uniforms. And now, Major League Baseball has seemed to found a way to screw that up. Now, yes, you're seeing uniforms that have been designed to be easier to breathe, I guess. I guess we don't want the big wool uniforms. But as one of the players on the Baltimore Orioles who said this in an article in the Atlantic anonymously, because he didn't want to get in trouble, said the new uniforms look like replica knockoffs from TJ Maxx. Ouch. Let's talk about unis. Let's talk about the duds and why the new duds are indeed duds, and what baseball has to kind of learn, even if they make adjustments, about why we love our uniforms and why they are critical. First, we're going to talk to our friends over at FanDuel. Hey, you get buckets on your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 of bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the National Basketball Association. Here's a quick reminder that Locked On has begun the first ever national sports 24 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Okay, the new uniforms look like garbage. They do. They look like uniforms. The uniforms you see at a Little League game. They have this weird kind of flimsy looking fabric. They don't have any weight to it. But also, the names on the back of the jerseys are tiny and kind of curved. I remember they look like the kind of uniforms, the kind of lettering you would get when you'd have to bring home the letters, and your mom would have to, my mom would iron on each individual letter, and they just look cheap. They just signed Shohei Ohtani, the Dodgers did, to all the money in the world, deferred down the line. And the first time you see him in the uniform, it looks like the kind of uniform you would buy driving up to Dodger Stadium with from those dudes who have the duffel bags who are holding the knockoffs. It looked bad, and the colors are slightly off. And you look at something like that's not the right Cub. That's not like the blue for the Cubs. It's a weird color for orange for the Orioles. I didn't really mind when they put the Nike swoosh on it. I know some people had a huge problem with that. I don't. Baseball has always had things hanging on the uniforms and on the side. And if you look at any other sport outside the United States, they're basically walking billboards for products. So a little swoosh there didn't bother me the way that some people do. But when you have uniforms that look cheap, it goes against the purpose of having the uniform. It goes against the whole notion of you're putting on the uniform and you want your team to look great when they win. That's part of the allure of baseball. That's part of the connection. Baseball has that, as I said, it has a illusion that the past, present, and future are all happening simultaneously. They're not. But when you put on the uniform, you feel that connection. You feel that. And I guess that's one of those when people want to wear the uniforms in the crowd. There's a connection with the players. And you don't want it to be a cheap-looking uniform. You don't want to look lousy. I understand that baseball has had some wild, crazy uniform adjustments over the past. Even this picture I have right back here. I have the picture from the 1979 Pirates when they wore the crazy combinations of black and yellow and stripes and everything. And down here is from the 72 World Series where the A's were in the forefront of experimenting with color and uniform and everything like that. I get it. There are times to make a change. But the thing is, those uniforms never look cheap. They sometimes looked wacky. And sometimes that wackiness was kind of cool. Joseph Nelson says, those old Houston Astros orange uniforms, for some reason, I liked. I'll tell you why you liked them, Joseph Nelson, because they were cool, they were unique, and you immediately identified them with the Astros. But these uniforms they have now just look chintzy, which kind of goes against the idea of being in the big leagues. And sometimes you see a team experiment with the unis. The next great Diamondbacks uniform will be their first great uniform. And sometimes they tinker too much with them. Make sure there's some teal in those uniforms for the Marlins, because that's how you associate them. That's why there was a big push to see the Padres bring back the brown and yellow, because it harkens back to Nate Colbert and Dave Winfield, and when Gossage and Nettles signed with the team in the early Tony Gwynn. You want to have that consistency. You want to have a sense of, I want to see the team dressed like the players I grew up rooting for winning it. There will be some exceptions, of course. There will be times that there'll be changes, of course. We've seen that in all different kinds of sports. I have so many friends and family who grew up in Colorado, diehard Bronco fans, who hated when they changed the helmet. No longer was the D, but just the horse. But then they started winning Super Bowls in that new uniform, and suddenly they grew to like it. Sometimes you have bad timing. The Minnesota Twins won the only 2 World Series titles they ever won in their entire time in Minnesota, with arguably the ugliest uniforms they ever had during their time in Minnesota. But hey, you see those unis now, and you'll have images of Kirby Puckett and Frankie Viola and Jack Morris dancing in your heads, and Danny Gladden dancing home to end the greatest World Series I ever saw. Yeah, you can have dud uniforms. And there's a certain charm to see some of the bad uniforms, but understand you want them to look good. And another thing, we need to have uniforms, the uniforms they wear in the All-Star game, because that's one of the great thrills of the All-Star game, is when they all line up in their different uniforms, and you see they're from the Pittsburgh Pirates, from the Los Angeles Dodgers, and they tip their hat. And when they're out in the fields, hey, that's my guy out there, not wearing these All-Star uniforms that look terrible. Last year, there wasn't a lot for a Colorado Rockies fan to cheer about in a very bad year that they had last year. Doyle came up, it was pretty good. They had that wild couple of games against the Yankees. But the fact of the matter is, their biggest highlight was Diaz being the All-Star Game MVP. And when you see the clip of him, he's wearing this nasty National League uniform where it says, like, you barely can see the CR of his Rockies logo on there, instead of seeing a Rocky player shining amongst all of the All-Stars. And the other thing that happens is, if they're all wearing the same uniform, I'm sometimes watching the game going like, wait, who the hell is that? I can't tell who it is. Seeing them in their uniforms kind of helps out telling who it is and who's the pitcher. I don't know what team he's on. It's not that hard. If you want to have a different fabric for the uniforms, fine. I don't know. I'm never going to wear them. But don't make them look cheap. And the letters on the back are too small. And apparently they're just stickers put on them instead of the big letters that are sewn on. Yeah, it was wild to see a player whose name went from one armpit to the other. Garcia Parra, it was always a big one when he was with the Red Sox. But the fact of the matter is, now it just looks too small. I can't even read that. It's not that hard to figure out. And for small letters, I guess Terrence Dunning blamed Encarnacion Strand. Yeah, but I want to see those. So come on, folks. Make the uniforms look good. If you want to make them breathe better and everything like that, fine. But don't make them look cheap. Don't make them look cheap. You've got to do better than the guys who are selling the stuff in duffel bags outside of the stadium. Time to talk to our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, let me tell you something. This is the time to be thinking about what you need to do to keep your car, your beloved car, your ride or die running well. And the best place to go visit is eBay Motors. They've got everything you need to maintain your vehicle and to keep it at peak performances. Superchargers, got them. Roof racks, got them. Exhaust kits, got them. LED headlights, whatever you want. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, or you're like me and my Ford Fury and you got all of them, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only and exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is available only to U.S. customers. Sorry, Canada. Hey, let's just remind you about Locked On's first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available at Amazon Fire TV on the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local extras of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Hey, a couple of moves were made. We still don't have Bellinger signed. We still don't have Snell signed. There's still a couple of big ones that haven't been signed, but a couple of smart moves have been made. First of all, the Royals made a trade with the Red Sox, and I think it's a good trade for both teams. John Schreiber had a very good 2022 with the Red Sox and was effective when he pitched last year with the Red Sox. He's going to be 30 years old this year, a relief pitcher. And the Red Sox got a young pitcher for the Royals organization, and the Royals are trying to put as many major leaguers on their staff as possible. I like what they're doing. They're saying, hey, it's a winnable division. Why don't we just load up on big leaguers? I think that's smart. I'll tell you what's also smart. The Arizona Diamondbacks made a signing for Randal Grichuk. Now, Randal Grichuk may not have enough L's for the name Randall. He spells it Randal and have that get through spell check. But Grichuk is going to join the defending National League champion Diamondbacks. And with it, he's bringing in a pretty reliable power bat. He peaked at 31 home runs when he was with Toronto. He's played in the postseason with several teams. And last year was with those Rockies that I mentioned. And he had a very good first half of the season with Colorado, and they were going exactly nowhere. And the Rockies managed to take advantage of that 3-minute period of time where the Angels thought they could contend and picked up a couple of minor league players for him. And we'll see where that'll end up. But either way, he was a rental that he did okay with the Angels when he was there. Got a couple of big hits. The Angels, went nowhere in an awful hurry, and then his numbers fell apart as they were falling apart. But he did wind up hitting 8 home runs in 54 games. He's now going to come to the Diamondbacks and come there with no pressure on him whatsoever. He's not being asked to carry this team. He's asked to be another big bat in a team that has a lot of good talent, has a lot of good young outfielders. So we need your bat. You can DH, be in the outfield, do all that other stuff, and we're not asking you to be the big guy. And that, in so many ways, is exactly the type of place he should be. The Diamondbacks are going to be a good team this year. And not just because they went to the World Series last year in kind of a weird year ahead of schedule situation. They have good pitching. They have good hitting. And now they've added another key power bat to their lineup without asking them to do much heavy lifting. I'll tell you another signing from someone who participated in a World Series in the last 2 years and faced off with the Diamondbacks last year. The Phillies signed Whit Merrifield. It's a 1-year deal. 1-year deals, by definition, are not risky. And they're not asking Whit Merrifield to be the guy on this team or the 2 or the 3 guy on this team. But to look back, when was Whit Merrifield last really effective? Well, he made the All-Star team last year. And yes, there have been times there have been duds making the All-Star team, but he had a very good first half of the season last year. His numbers fell off a cliff, but he was still someone, if you take he still had decent numbers with Toronto, has power, has speed, 3 times has led the American League in stolen bases. But the most important thing is, besides the fact that they're not asking him to carry the squad, they kind of sort of have Bryce Harper and other people to carry that. They're asking me the third or fourth banana, but he also can play the outfield and he can play the infield. That sort of player becomes valuable on a team like the Phillies, where he could fill in where needed. They suddenly get all sorts of crazy depth and a guy where you're not asking him to carry the team. There was a period of time where he was the man in Kansas City in those years after they won the World Series and things started spiraling. Eventually, it yielded Bobby Witt Jr. I digress. I love moves like this because this is the sort of thing that doesn't get the sexy headlines. It doesn't become the big, oh my God, I can't believe they signed this big star. The Phillies have already done that. They said, hey, you're an all-star several times over. You're a stolen base king several times over. You've got pop. You can play outfield, infield. We're not asking you to be the star. Just be a weapon on our team. And you'll see a lot of times players like that are going to be very effective. Thank you very much. That's why I think Teoscar Hernandez was such a great sign for Los Angeles. You get someone who's been the big guy on the team, and you're asking him, you don't have to do that anymore. So Grichuk and Merrifield were not big, huge headline grabbers like we're expecting some of the other players to be, but I guarantee you down the stretch, we're going to look back like, man, those are good pickups for the team. Hey, let's check out CNN. Who else has commented here? Joseph Nelson says, Witt is a perfect fit for anyone who gets hurt. Exactly. Joseph, he also asked me, where do I think Blake Snell is going to sign? I still think the Giants are the best place for him. But there you go. And but hey, let's go for today's trivia question. Today's trivia question is this. There have been several times a player has hit a walk-off home run in a World Series game for the team that went on to lose that World Series. An example is Carlton Fisk hitting the home run, the famous home run off the foul pole in the 1975 World Series. Super dramatic home run, but the Reds went on to win that World Series despite that heroics for the Red Sox. Only one player who ever hit a walk-off home run in the World Series for the team that ultimately went on to lose that World Series is not currently in the Hall of Fame. All the other ones who hit home runs to walk-off home runs in the World Series for the team that went on to lose, all of them now have their own plaque in the Hall of Fame, except one. Who is the lone non-Hall of Famer who has hit a walk-off home run in the World Series for the losing squad? That is your trivia question. It's convoluted, but hopefully it made sense to you. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Talking about shirts, because that's what we've come to. This has been Locked On MLB for the 18th day of February. It took me a second. By the way, Jeff Cohen says, where do you come up with these trivia questions? It's my head. I come up with them myself. Do you know why? Because I'm your pal, Paul Francis Sullivan, and you can call me Sully. It's just how my brain works. It's just how my brain works.